Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey, thanks so much for the opportunity to interview you. Appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, great to see you again, Sam.
So I know you're a business consultant. Also, you run a coaching and training business. For the audience that don't know much about you, can you tell a little bit about who you are?
My name's Ed Erickson. And I've got a coaching and training business where I work with small business owners to really help them kind of build up the business that they had these dreams about before they started, that the reality maybe isn't quite living up to. And that all sort of grew out of this 20-year career I had in corporate consulting, where I learned a lot. I saw a lot about how businesses work and how people work in businesses. And as time went on, I just started to feel like I really wanted to do something to help the small business owner use some of those tools that are available to much bigger companies. So that was sort of the birth of the coaching business.
Makes sense. And then you have that consulting side of the business as well, right?
Yeah. Yes, we still have that consulting business. Yeah.
Makes sense. And I have the tendency to call you a coach because you've been my coach and you've helped us for the last several years that we've been working together. So one of the main concept that I still continue to remind myself is the whole the concept of working in the business versus on the business, right?
Oh yeah. That's a huge thing, and really it's one of the biggest things that I see small business owners make a mistake with is. Well, I have to back up to the beginning, right? It all starts because the vast majority of people that go out and start a business, they do it because they're good at doing something. Mm-hmm. The lawyer opens up a law firm, or the accountant opens up an accounting business, the plumber starts a plumbing company, the coder writes an app and tries to build a business around it. But the fundamental thing is it's all based on they were good at doing this thing, so that's what they do. And what they learn once they get into it is that doing the thing that their business does and running the business are two totally different skill sets. And they've trained their whole life to do the thing, but for the most part, they've never trained a single day to run the business. So they quickly find themselves getting overwhelmed and frustrated that they're not getting the results that they want. So that's where I come in, and the training aspects really are to take that person who almost always is motivated, hardworking, smart. They just haven't ever had that exposure to the material to know what to do. So I train them in that. And then we start working on the mindset of, like you said, getting out of that, the book, The E-Myth Revisited, which I totally suggest everybody read, makes this distinction between the technician, right? That's the person that does the work. And that's where they're stuck, right? They're just doing the work and doing the work and doing the work. But what they have to do is get out of that, working in the business, doing the work, to working on the business as the entrepreneur building a business.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what I do when I start working with people.
And I think it all comes down to having the confidence to be able to remove yourself from the business, to be able to say, okay, how do I make sure that if I'm not part of the equation, how do I make sure this business runs on its own, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as an entrepreneur, when you're getting started, you kind of did everything. You're accountant, you're the HR, you were the practitioner, the salesperson, the operation person. So you start to get so integrated into it, and it seem like, okay, if I just walk away for a day, everything's going to collapse. So that's where I think the difficulty of working on the business versus in the business as an entrepreneur becomes extremely hard, right? I think especially if you haven't had that training or the coach that comes alongside and give you the recommendation and the training and the tips that you need to be able to figure out, what do I need to do to get out of the day-to-day so I can focus on the strategic item of how to take this business to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I see that all the time, right? It's when you start, it's out of necessity. You do everything because you can't afford to hire anybody. But then because you get so ingrained in that model and that working in the business mindset, is that you start to scale a business in the manner that I like to call the hero with 1,000 helpers. Mm-hmm. Basically meaning you're still doing everything. You're just hiring some assistants to help you get it done. So in that sense, you're really not scaling so much as you're just finding people to delegate some work to. Mm-hmm. The business is still completely dependent on you. You're still spending all your time working in it, and you're still just setting yourself up for a problem. So that's where changing it to that working on the business thing. And it, like I said, it's some education, but it's a lot of mindset too.
obviously you can get a lot of the insights from reading books and listening to podcasts and a million other ways you can collect information inside on how to do business or how to do some of those practical stuff.
Absolutely.
Why would someone need a business coach?
I said, beyond the learning, which, like you said, you can learn a lot from Google and YouTube. It really comes down to a couple of things. One, there's mentorship. Right? A good coach has sort of been there, done that. And by that, I don't necessarily mean that they've done the exact business that you are trying to do, but they've built a business, right? They've lived it. They've been there. They've seen these struggles, and can act as a mentor or sort of an outside advisor. Just that voice that you can bounce these ideas off of that are not necessarily conversations that you can go home and have with your partner or that you can talk to your employees about, but it's that outside bit of help. And the other thing really is accountability, because when you think about the practical day-to-day reality is that you tend to focus on the stuff that people are yelling about. Right? So, if you're a business owner and you're in a business and you've got clients you're serving, where's your focus? Your focus is on delivering the stuff that your clients are asking for. And, that's what gets it. But what that means, because there's only so many hours in the day, is that the time you're spending on that fulfillment and that sort of work, you're not spending on building the business. And there isn't anybody who's calling you up and saying, where's your marketing plan? Where's this, set of goals for the next 6 months? Nobody's doing that, right? So it tends to get pushed down. It's kind of the urgent, pushes out the important. So then another important thing that the coach does, right, is hold you accountable. Right? The coach becomes that client who's calling and saying, where's your marketing plan? Where's your goals for the next 6 months? And by having that bit of accountability, it really helps you stay on track and stay focused on the stuff you need to be doing.
Yeah, and I think I can really attest to that, because I think when we were working on certain things, the fear that I have to be accountable to the coach. He's going to call me on Thursday at 4:00, and we need to have these 4 things ready before that call. So that get me to find time that I didn't have, to often time to sit down and figure out what I need to get done. Or if I didn't get it done, then I had to face the coach and be able to deal with the consequences, right? So that I think is an important part of is kind of growing as an entrepreneur, because you kind of need somebody else that you're accountable to, because most other people within the organization are actually accountable to you, and you don't really have anybody else that you're accountable to, unless you have a board or a co-founder or somebody else that might be keeping you in check.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a great point in terms of why you need an accountable, why you need to have a coach that you can be accountable to.
Yeah, and almost in the situation where you have a co-founder or partners, it's almost more so, because in a lot of ways you can think of a partnership arrangement as almost like a marriage without the sex. So, sometimes you need sort of that outside third party to, adjudicate disputes, or to help people see things, in a possibly different way, or be able to find the common ground that sometimes isn't so easy when 2 people sit in a room and try to work something out.
Makes sense. So what does it mean to actually work on the business?
Well, the working on the business, right? It becomes this mindset and this different way of seeing the business, right? The way that I think of it is, in any thriving business, it's the intersection of the who you are, what you do, and who you serve. And what you need to do is be able to step back and see the big picture and how those pieces fit together to get that intersection. You can almost think of like these 3 different globes like floating around, and then when you massage them and you bring them together, right, you get like the big flash of light in the middle, and that's the business. But what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to conceptualize that. And you have to be able to take this bigger view and not see the business as me and a few people just doing a bunch of stuff and getting paid for it, but rather see the business as this collection of systems and processes that all sort of work together, that are no longer dependent on the owner. It's usually the common thing, or really any specific individual. But instead, the business becomes this deliberately designed thing that, like I said, is working on what is it all about, and who does it serve, and what really does it do, and how does it do it any differently or any better than the 10,000 other people doing exactly the same thing out there.
Makes sense. And how does where the systems and processes come into that picture? Where does that fall into?
It sort of permeates the whole business. But most obviously, it's the how you do what you do, right? It becomes a way to consistently and profitably deliver your service. It becomes the way to consistently market, and in a lot of ways, by creating sort of these standard, the way we do it here type approach. Is what you're doing is you're sort of codifying the purpose and the values of the business and of the owner into everything that happens.
Makes sense. Obviously, you've been helping businesses all over the country for years now. Mm-hmm. And you've seen a lot of different things that being done by business owners. What are some of the common mistakes you've seen them make?
I think they fall into a whole bunch of buckets, but probably two of the biggest ones that are also tend to be the easiest to fix. Is first, they don't really know who it is their target market is. I can't count the number of times I've asked somebody, so who's your ideal customer, and what I get as an answer is some version of everybody. Like, well, no, it's not everybody, because what happens when you try to serve everybody?
You serve nobody.
Yeah, you serve nobody, right? You can almost think of it as by doing that you're trying to go like 1,000,000 miles wide and an inch deep. And there's not much there, right? And in order to appeal to such a broad base of people, you have to water your message down so much that it just becomes blah to everybody and nobody cares. And you have a very hard time. Instead of really getting super specific and focused on who your exact ideal customer is, it becomes more of the go 1,000,000 miles deep and an inch wide situation. And you can almost think of it, maybe less so today, but you think of the Apple of 10 years ago, right? It was like cult-like following of people that they loved Apple, right? They went 1,000,000 miles deep and an inch wide, right? They solved one very specific problem. They had a tiny sliver of the computer market, but they had these rabidly loyal customers that were never leaving them ever, no matter what. Versus, say a big conglomerate that's, let's make some money making some PCs. Right? The minute somebody else pricks one out that's $10 cheaper, right, they're gone.
Somebody switch, yeah.
So it's that's a huge mistake I see people make is they aren't focused enough on a specific audience, and because of that, everything gets diluted. Right? They can't get focus in their marketing. They can't really come up with a strong, compelling message because they're trying to make it appeal to the lowest common denominator of a broad section of people. So there's one. Another one that I see tends to come in around hiring, where most small business owners tend to have this mindset of, I can't afford to hire people. Right? No matter how much money they're making, they have this mindset they can't afford to hire people. So they put it off and they put it off and they put it off and they put it off, and suddenly it's a crisis, right? They desperately need somebody in there now. Usually they need somebody in there 2 weeks ago. So when that happens is they panic and they hire sort of the first semi-acceptable person that shows up in front of them, and rarely does that end well. Right? What you get then is people who just aren't a good fit for the company, people who maybe lack the skills, and then you just get back into that cycle again, right? So now you're just constantly cycling through people because you're never finding the right one. So really what they need to do is they need to spend a lot more time up front thinking about, well, why am I hiring somebody? What are they doing? Right? What are the qualities I need in a person who's going to be successful in this position? And then be very deliberate and take their time in bringing them in. And that is much more a recipe for a successful hire of somebody who's going to stick around for a while and be productive and contribute.
Well, certainly. So it seems like differentiation based on specialization is one of the key things that they need to do. So having a good understanding of their target market, knowing who they're targeting so they can specialize in that, so that becomes their messaging in terms of their sales and marketing efforts. And then having the right people in the bus. If you don't have that, then you're really screwed.
Oh, yeah,
you really
absolutely.
Right. Yeah, because they can make or break your business, right? Especially as you're scaling up, that's where you have to have the right teammates that can fill in the right roles, and then obviously that's going to help you in terms of the next hire. Because if you don't have the right people, you're probably not going to attract the next right person into your team as well.
Exactly. And all of this, of course, is predicated on, as the owner, you actually have to know what it is you're trying to accomplish, and you have to know what it is that you stand for, and you have to know how different people are going to fit into the bigger picture of how the organization works. So that's where all of that work that I talked about a few minutes ago comes in, of that thriving company being the intersection of the who you are, right? Who you are, it's what are your values that show up in the business? What's the purpose for the business to exist in the first place? What are you really all about? And the what do you do, right? That's what exact service or product are you providing, and what value are you delivering, and what specific way do you do it in? Right? If you don't understand those things, you're not going to be able to figure out who the right person to hire is.
So obviously you had the luxury of being, front and center, watching some of these businesses grow. But what are some of the limiting beliefs you've seen the companies that suffer to scale and grow?
Some of the biggest ones are just a lack of belief that they can do it, or a decision basically right at the beginning that whatever the worst possible outcome is what's actually going to happen. Those are really the big ones. I heard someone say once, the real secret to being an entrepreneur is being able to take action on the things that you can't see. Which, when you think about it, there's a lot of truth there, right? It's you're creating this thing out of nothing, right? And you have to be able to see that end product long before it's reality, and that's what gives you the drive to stick to it, right? But a lot of those limiting beliefs that I see are people that can't see that. Right. What they see is the fact that they have a mortgage payment to make at the end of the month, and their sales are coming up short.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why I think sometimes the entrepreneurs have this hard time giving up some of these responsibilities, because they just don't have the confidence that some of the people that they're going to delegate to have that foresight to see way past tomorrow, right? And so they're just afraid. Okay, if I hand this over to them, they have no idea what might happen with this thing or that thing, and then they're just afraid of the fear of delegation, because you just don't know if that person can come through and execute on whatever you're handing over to them.
Yeah, those fears happen, but actually where those fears really come up is when they haven't done the work on where is this business going, what does this business stand for, and how do we do things? Because that's really all about setting up this framework for people to come in and be successful. One of the things, and I mentioned the E-Myth earlier, and one of the basic tenets in that book, right, is you as the entrepreneur that are building a business, right? You build the systems, right? And the systems run the business, and the people run the systems. So once you've done that work of building those systems, then you can bring people in a well-defined role that's documented and understood, and be able to train them to do what they need to do, and then you can have faith that they do it. And again, by being clear on what matters, right? What's the vision for the business? Why is the business here? What are the values that the business upholds? Those become filters for hiring, right? And you only want to hire people that are on board with that. And when you do, now you have a person who's motivated by something more than getting their paycheck at the end of the week, because they've bought into this vision and they want to see it happen, as much as the owner does.
Makes sense. Obviously, you helped a lot of businesses grow, and you've seen a lot of their struggles, and you've been able to apply some of those things to your own, your own business that you're building. What are some hard lessons you learned firsthand building your own companies?
Oh, hard lessons that I learned firsthand. There are so many. In a lot of ways, my desire to become a coach, and my my ability to do it reasonably well, was that I made a ton of mistakes with my first business. Chief among them was, trying to do too much myself. Again, trying to be that, hero with 1,000 helpers instead of deliberately creating a business that can function. I did that. I didn't pay enough attention to really defining who the target was. It was, I had come out of working for other consulting firms, so the clients I got, it was basically the same types of people I've been serving all along. But what I didn't do early on was really narrow that down and get very specific about it, which had the effect of, one, like we talked about a few minutes ago, totally watering down my message and just making me like another Me Too provider, which made it that much harder to win business. But it also really scattered the the business development efforts because I wasn't laser focused on one super specific type of person, which, in the corporate world would have meant that there might have been 200 people in the country that were really my target, and I really could have paid a lot of attention to them and been effective. But instead, I was going after this much wider swath of people, and I was spreading myself too thin. I just didn't have the resources to do it.
What other lessons, parting wisdom do you have for our audience?
Mindset, for sure. To be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner, you have to be an eternal optimist, because you'll have a breakdown if you're not. Because there, as from your own experience as well, right? There are 1,000,001 things that can go wrong on any given day. And if you let yourself be affected by that and you let that throw you off, you're just going to be crumpled up in a corner in the fetal position and not doing anything, right? You need that ability to be resilient. And, so what if yesterday sucked? Tomorrow is a new day. You woke up, you have a chance to do something different. So you get up and you do it.
Sounds good. Well, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you so much.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by OneIMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.